Welcome everyone to the Pick Six podcast, where we discuss the biggest stories in college football. I'm your host, Chris Chang, and thank you for joining us for another episode. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe as we go through each one of these stories throughout the day. Now, there are some important rules in college football that I think most coaches, most players would agree with. One is to stay in your lane. Don't get distracted. Also, don't give the other team bulletin board material. Keep your mouth shut. And last, here's a simple one. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. Or as Nick Saban we might put it, don't take the rat poison. And wouldn't you have it, first year FSU quarterback Thomas Castellanos managed to get a hat trick and breaking all three. Castellanos called out Alabama for not being the same program it was under Nick Saban. In a recent interview with Pete Nakos at On3, Castellanos said, "I'm excited, man. People, I don't know if they know, but you go back and you watch every first game that I played in, and we always started fast. I dreamed of moments like this. I dreamed of playing against Alabama. They don't have Nick Saban to save them, and I don't see them stopping me." Now, that's a bit of a bold, might I suggest borderline reckless words for a guy who was benched at Boston College. But you think he would stop there at Bama? Oh no, he wanted all the smoke with the rest of the ACC, saying, "I feel like I tore the ACC up by my damn self for the last 2 years, and now I'm with the squad. I hope people don't think that Florida State is going to be the same team it was last year because we have weapons. People can't just sit back in zone coverage and watch me." Now, his former teammate at Boston College, DB Cameron Martinez, had a different recollection, saying, "That's not exactly how I remember it." And frankly, that's not how I remember it either. As BC went 4-4 in ACC play and 7-6 overall, Castellanos went 99 for 161 in his completion to attempts, 61% completion percentage. He had a little over 1,300 yards and averaged about 8.5 yards per throw just in 6 games, as he was replaced by Grayson James, who went for 106 for 166, 64% completion percentage, a little over 1,200 yards, and averaged about 7.2 yards per throw. Not that far off. Now, the Outlanders claims got even to the South Carolina Gamecocks quarterback Lenora Sellers, who chimed in and said, "Alabama is still Alabama to me," said Sellers. "They were good last year. They're a big team. They're big, strong, and fast. That's how I remember watching them growing up, and I really don't think they've changed that much. Obviously, they've got a new coaching staff and all that, but that's still SEC ball. That is still Bama." So listen, I get it. He's channeling his inner alpha. He wants to show his team that he's going to lay it all out there, that he's not scared of stepping up to, the Alabama program. I think the issue is FSU is a program that's kind of in disarray at this point. After going 2-10 last season, having that abysmal season that they had last year, I think even most diehard FSU fans would tell you that expectations probably aren't that high. And so when you're going into this next season, you kind of want to go in low key, you kind of want to keep your mouth shut, just roll with it. Who knows? I think after watching a few FSU podcasts, a lot of the sentiment is, hey, we don't need to beat Bama. We would just like to be competitive. And I think that actually would be a win. I don't believe in moral victories that much either. I mean, depending every game is unique and different. But I think in this particular case between Bama and FSU, I think it would be a win if FSU was competitive. If they could show that, hey, we can still compete and keep up with the upper echelons of the SEC despite going 2-10 last year, despite having the season we had. And it's like, listen, at the end of the day, culture in general in Tallahassee, it's shaky at best. I mean, you can tell, like there were a lot of mercenaries on their team last season who clearly gave up after the second game, after losing to Boston College. Fun fact, considering the fact they have a Boston College quarterback now. But keeping a buck, I mean, FSU won't be contending for an ACC championship. I mean, is it impossible? No. But common sense would say that a team finished dead last in the conference is all of a sudden going to compete, and that's all of a sudden going to turn their program around. No, I think even FSU fans, if you were to like pull them aside and privately and say, "Hey, if you went 6-6, would you be happy?" I think they would probably say, "Yeah, it's an improvement from last year." No one's expecting them to like play in Charlotte, and especially when you have barely had a top 20 recruiting class. I think last year FSU finished like 18th or 19th in recruiting, which for FSU is not good. FSU is used to having top 10, at a minimum, top 15 recruiting classes. And last year they did not. And then on top of that, under Mike Norvell, period, they do not recruit well in high school. This year, it's a little different going into the 2026 season. We're seeing an improvement. We're seeing players gravitate towards that program, but they're not going to be on the field. They're not going to be on the field this year. It's just, they're not going to be able to help. And could Castellanos be for real? Absolutely. Who knows? I mean, everyone was doubting, Cam Ward last year, and look what he did. He blew the ACC open. He was the most prolific quarterback. We had the most prolific offense. I just don't see that though with FSU. I think there's just too many pieces that need to be reloaded and replaced. And it's like, I just don't know if you want to be adding any kind of weight like that to your teammates' shoulders heading into your season opener. I mean, if it was, let's just be real. If this was Carson Beck saying this about Notre Dame as we go into week 1, I would take the same issue with it. This isn't like I'd be like, oh yeah, Carson Beck can say that, or any one of our quarterbacks could say that. No. Again, there's the same standard would apply to Miami as it does to FSU. And again, more so to FSU because of the way they finished last season, the way they went last season. And then again, the pieces that they're replacing. I mean, when you're having an overhaul, people already, if you go into our chat from our top 25 video, we went into it with some Notre Dame fans and they're telling us that, we had to completely replace our team. And yes, are we replacing a few teammates? Absolutely. We lost our wide receivers, but I think we're replacing them with some young, great, talented receivers in their place. And that's proven based on our recruiting rank. FSU's not in that position. And so I just think I would not approach it this way. And it's a little rich coming from Tallahassee with them drinking. I don't know what's in the water up there in Tallahassee, but we will see when Alabama comes to town on August 30th. Moving over to the West Coast, the Pac-12 is back. But are they? Are they really? The league recently finalized an agreement with CBS Sports earlier this week, extending their media partnership through the 2030-31 season. The Pac-12 is also planning on adding Texas State to be their final school needed to complete the conference. Financial terms for the agreement with CBS Sports were not disclosed. Wonder why? But experts pinned the number somewhere between 7 and 15 million a year, with the real number hovering between 7 and 10 million a year. Now, as part of the deal, CBS will broadcast the conference's football and men's basketball championship games, along with at least 3 regular season games on CBS, and then the other games being shown on both sports and all their various networks. The Pac-12, which currently sits with just 2 teams, will see its membership grow to at least 8 schools in 2026 by adding 5 teams from the Mountain West Conference in Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, San Diego State, and Utah State. They should just be called the Pac State Conference. Gonzaga will also join for sports, but not football. So now you may be asking, why does this matter, Chris? Why do I care about the Pac-12? Well, here is the thing, right? When you look at what happened to the Pac-12, they were gutted, right? And so what does that force them to do? They can either just fall apart and dissolve, and then Wazoo and Oregon State have to find a new home, right? Or they can try to, coalesce, get the best pieces that they can get and try to put together another power conference. But the issue is they're going to have to raid the Mountain West and Sun Belt Conference, and that presents a cascading problem that is synonymous with realignment. What is the future of these G5 schools? The Mountain West, being probably one of the most prominent G5 conferences, is now a shell of what it is, losing half of its membership and probably going to lose more. I think when BYU left the Mountain West to become independent and then go to the Big 12, which we'll talk about later, was a major kind of albatross for the Mountain West. If this isn't with Boise State leaving, I don't know what is. And that's going to go again across, because now the Mountain West is going to have to raid another conference to fill their coffers. And so we're going to see this domino effect. And so it's like, for example, like I wanted to mention was the Mountain West just lost half of its conference. And all these other leagues are now going to have to either increase their exit fees, come up with some sort of financial stipulation for them to leave. And it's going to be, what's going to happen? What are we going to do? And again, it's not just the Mountain West that's going to affect everyone. The Sun Belt, the AAC. All of these conferences are now like, oh, who's coming for my guys now? And the worst part for the Mountain West is They need to do it by next summer as their own media agreements with Fox and CBS ends. So with this last bit of life injected in the conference here, this is what I think needs to happen, right? I think Pac-12 schools, Stanford and Cal, who are in the ACC, need to go back. I think they're going to quickly find it's not as lucrative as they think it's going to be. They're not competitive. I mean, Cal literally lost half their team. They lost all their offense. They lost their quarterback, all their entire running back room. It's going to be very hard for them to compete. I know they got a great defensive lineman, I think, or edge rusher that committed to them. But again, that's next year. That's not this year. And that's one player, right? Stanford, they're in disarray. They just lost their coach. They have an interim coach who's only going to last a year. Who's going to replace them? It's all up in the air, right? And I think what they need to do is what Colorado and what BYU did. Colorado left the Pac-12 to go back to the Big 12, right? BYU left the Mountain West to become independent, then went to the Big 12. And I think that's what these two schools need to do. I think Stanford and Cal, it's not that I don't want them. I just don't think it makes financial sense. And I was watching Chuck Todd on a podcast. He's a big UM fan, by the way, for all our UM watchers. He was mentioning that Miami's biggest or most costly trip used to be to Blacksburg, Virginia, right? Obviously now with realignment and us having these West Coast teams and all these teams up north, like in Syracuse and things like that, it's changed a little bit. But I think the idea was that Blacksburg was so expensive because one, the logistics of getting there were hard. It's the same thing. I know it's a flight over, but that's far and that's a lot of money. And in the first few years, yeah, you can do that. You can make that happen. You can move some things around, but to sustain that, I feel like it's impossible. And I think you can kind of give some credence back to the Pac-12 if they want to stay a Power 5. If you can bring back, the original members in Stanford and Cal, you can make them finally, well, they would only be a Pac-10. But hey, you can go back to the Pac-10 for those of you who are too young. It used to be called the Pac-10. And make that happen. I think also another major thing we were alluding to earlier with the G5 is I really believe, and I don't mean this in a derogatory sense, it's just matter of fact, is the haves and have-nots, it's going to be clear, and we're going to see it. It's going to be very apparent in the next 5 years. It'll be even more so in the next 10 years. And I think the G5 needs to prepare and needs to condense into one conference in the league. It needs to separate itself from the Power 5 if the Pac-12 is able to, somehow get back on its feet and get running and being competitive again, mainly through Boise State, to be honest, maybe Oregon State, maybe Washington State, if they can get some recruits and stuff. But realistically, the Pac-12 only has going into the 2026 season when all these teams join is Boise State as a real perennial power in terms of a football program. And so I think a lot of these schools, and maybe it's the Pac-12 also, just they need to separate and they need to get away from the Power 4, Power 5 conferences. It's just, it's not realistic to say you're going to compete with them. It's semi-delusional to say that at some point you will. Even if you go to private equity, it's just not going to work. And I think if they separate themselves from the P5, they can sit in a nice space where they're just as happy. You could even move the bowl system to the G5 schools, because the bowl system right now in FBS in these Power 4 schools, no one really cares. A lot of the Power 4 school players will sit out and not play. Get these G5 kids to play in it. They would love that, or even maybe give them their own playoff like FCS has, right? And again, that domino effect I was talking about earlier when I was talking about people rating each of the G5s, the smaller G5s, guess what they're going to rate next? The FCS level. And guess what those people want to do? They're going to want to bring it up. But I think that was the idea and the behavioral patterns 5-10 years ago. Now with the House settlement, it's different because now schools have to pay. And I don't think a lot of these FCS schools and a lot of these smaller G5 schools are going to have the budget in their athletic departments to keep up. So it's like, yo, let's not make them compete. Like no one's expecting, a Honda Civic, to keep up with, I don't know, a Corvette. It's just, it's not going to happen. Like, I don't care what you do to that Civic. I don't care how many turbos you put into it. It's not going to keep up with that Corvette. It is what it is. And so I think at the end of the day that there needs to be that separation. And then this is the most important question in this story, right? There's the glaring issue. Is the Pac-12 still a power conference. I don't want to be doom and gloom. I don't want to be a negative Nancy. I just want to speak facts. And financially, no. Valuation that the new media contracts would have them at would be roughly comparable to the American Athletic Conference media deal with ESPN, and it would only be double what the Mountain West is currently receiving from Fox and CBS. So it's it's basically comparable to a G5, and it's just above, double what the most prominent G5 conference is getting from Fox and CBS. Again, how are these schools supposed to compete with the ACC or Big 12, right? I'm talking about specifically, not the G5, the Pac-12. How is the Pac-12 supposed to compete with the ACC or Big 12? I mean, let's just say the low number is the 7 million. I mean, that is literally 1/3, I believe, or probably even less than 1/5 of what the ACC is making in the Big 12. I mean, if you get to the 15, it's maybe half, right? Again, year or two, you could easily make that happen. Year 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, you get to a decade from now, it's not sustainable. And that's just the ACC and the Big 12, who are considered the small fish in this pond, let alone the Big 10 or the SEC. I mean, you are not even in remotely, at this point, you're playing two different sports, right? And so I just think financially they're not. Now, I think, like I've been saying, within the decade, we're going to see this, and it's going to be silly to compare them. There's no way, and you even see it. You can't compare Washington State even to an Auburn, right? They're just, I mean, even though, yes, Cal beat Auburn, the program might get lucky on a weekend or two. But when you're talking about the health and the sustainability of the program, it's not going to happen. And then there's the most important thing that we like to talk to on this show, which is the branding, right? Absolutely not. I am so sorry. I do not mean this in an insulting way, but the Pac-12, the Pac State 12, no one cares about. No one cares about any of those teams. We can say that Wazoo and Oregon State remain loyal to the Pac-12, but the truth is no one wanted them. Their brands were not big enough to take them to the Big 12 or to take them to any other conference. No, the Big 10 absolutely wanted nothing to do with them, and neither did the Big 12. The Big 12 could have easily taken more, and they chose not to. Now you want to add a bunch of sub-tier teams. I mean, again, I'm sorry to say this, but with Boise State and Fresno State holding equal value best to a competitive team in maybe the ACC or Big 12, definitely not the SEC or Big 10. No, you're not adding value. You're getting a bunch of lower tier teams that are coming into your conference, and now all of a sudden you want to say you're a Power 5. You're not. You're absolutely, maybe if you can get Cal and Stanford to come back, maybe because you add a little prominence with those traditional schools, and maybe with through time they can renegotiate, but with their media contracts in 2031 when this ends. But I can't see and I can't imagine that ESPN, Fox, CBS would look at the Pac-12 in its current state, even if you added Cal and Stanford, and say, yeah, that's the same conference or of somewhat equal value to when USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington were still there. It's just not real. And not only that, I don't say this just pulling, something out of the air. We've seen this already before, and it was called the Big East, not the basketball side Big East, but the football side Big East, right? They had to rebrand to the AAC, and they never recovered. The AAC never recovered. The AAC, even again, when Louisville was in it, they left to come to the ACC. It wasn't real, and it wasn't sustainable. And so I bring all this up because we have to remember that under the current bylaws of the CFP, the Pac-12 champion still gets a playoff berth, right? They didn't last year, and they won't this year because they only have 2 members. But once they become a full conference at 8 members, they according to the bylaws of the CFP, they would technically have the right to qualify for the playoffs. And what's interesting about that time frame, when we talk about when these new teams are coming in and they become a whole conference, that will be the same time that the commissioners from the Big 10 and the SEC will be taking the majority of control of decisions of the college football playoffs. Will they still categorize the Pac-12 as a Power 5? That's going to be the interesting question, whether Petiti or Sankey in 2026, when all these people come in and then they get the full voting rights, of where they want to take the playoff system, where does it go? Is it still a Power 5 conference? Speaking of the playoffs, we have got to talk about CFP leaders meeting in Asheville, North Carolina last week. Many people expected it, and it happened. No decisions were made. Nothing is changing for the playoff format in 2026 and beyond. The Big Ten and SEC commissioners have the bulk of control over it, but infighting between those two commissioners is keeping them from being on the same page. Now, the biggest source of contention is leaders in the Big Ten don't want to consider what's called a 5+11 format unless the ACC and the ACC go to 9 league games, who both of those leagues only play 8 conference games. Now, most coaches in the SEC are not aligned with their ADs in moving to 9 conference games. There's this kind of like civil war between the athletic directors and coaches. So a lot of the ADs are saying, let's just move to 9 games so we can get this moving. A lot of the coaches who are doing this weekend in and weekend out, they are saying no, because they believe there's no incentive to play the extra game because of the difficulty of playing in the SEC. And the fact that a 5+11 model could keep teams out in the instance of a competitive season, right? So before we go any further, let's discuss some of the options that have been on the board. First, we have the current 12-team format, which is what we're looking at right now, which includes the top 5 ranked conference champions and the next 7 highest ranked teams. This year, the playoff will not give byes to conference champions like it did last year, but will do straight seeding, meaning the top 4 teams will get the bye whether they're conference champions or not. Next, we move to the increasing the pool to 16 teams with the aforementioned 5+11 model, which would give the top 5 conference champions an automatic bid to the playoff, with the remaining spots being given to the top 11 teams that were not conference champions. Now, there's no discussion when we talk about the 5+11 how they would do the seeding. I think they're just struggling to get to whether it's a 5+11 or, lastly, the other 16-team model known as the 4-4-2-2-1-1. I know I'm getting into a lot of numbers here, but just kind of think of it as the 4-4-2-2 with the 1-1s, changing depending on whether it's a 14 or a 16 team. This would see both the SEC and the Big Ten getting 4 auto bids each. So that's where you get the 4 and the 4. So the first 2 4s would go towards the SEC and the Big Ten. The 2 2s would go towards the ACC and the Big 12, each getting 2, and then the G5 conferences would get 1, and then there would be, depending on whether there was a 14-team or 16-team, 3 at-large spots or 1 at-large spot in a 14-team scenario. Now, since the 2014 playoff, here's what each of the conferences have averaged in terms of teams in the top 16. The Big 10 has averaged about 5.3 teams. The SEC has averaged 5, a solid 5. And the Big 12 has followed up with 2.4 and the ACC rounding it out with exactly 2. So based on that 4-4-2-2 model, it kind of equals out. But this is the wildest part of everything. The wildest part is that a lot of people involved in the sport are taking positions that are diametrically opposed to what would be the most advantageous situation for them. For example, we just talked about the Big 12 getting 2, right? 2 automatic bids. That means no matter what, no matter how your teams finish, whether it's 6-6, 9-3, it doesn't matter. You're going to get in. 2 teams, right? Brett Yormark, the commissioner of the Big 12, stated he preferred a 5+11 model over the 4-4-2-2, meaning in some years he would only get his conference champion in. What's 1 team, which could put his conference at a disadvantage if their only qualifier was that champion instead of locking in the 2. Ole Miss head coach Lane Kiffin said, to hell with the AQs, automatic qualifiers. Let's just put in the top 16 teams in. That little crazy because, again, without correct rankings or some sort of objective ranking system, I'm really against that. The deadline now for the CFP executives to reach a decision is December 1st, so they've got some time. I think they've got 2 or 3 meetings scheduled before they have to make that decision. But what do you think the solution is? What is the magic number? Is it 12? Is it 14? Is it 16 teams? Are there even 16 legitimate teams who can compete for a championship, right? I don't know. Some would say yes. Some would say absolutely not. There's at best maybe 6. And then should there be automatic qualifiers? If so, should they be allotted? Should people be just each conference be given a certain number? Should it be equal? Should it just be conference champions who get automatic qualifiers, right? Should just, if you win your conference, you're in. Everyone else, you got to finish high in the rankings. Or is a particular number of top teams in a conference allowed in. So for example, if you finish, top 3 in any of your conferences, we're going to get you in. And so for example, if in a 14 team, you would probably get all the power 4 conferences. And then if you automatic qualifiers, if we did 16, you would get all the power 5 plus, Notre Dame and a G5. Who knows? Jump in the comment section. Let me know what you think. I want to know what the answer is because we have got to fix this. Well, guys, we have gotten through another one. Another episode is in the books. Thank you all for watching. Don't forget to shoot us your story ideas. What do you want me to talk about next? Is there something in college football that you think we're not covering, that someone else isn't covering, that you would love to hear about? Thank you all for watching. Until next week, be good, y'all. Win the weekend. And as always, go Canes.